All right. Hello again to DBT for FND, where we are adapting DBT for persons with FND. And we are in the middle of the emotion regulation skills and accumulating positive emotions in the long term is what we're going to be talking about today. And again, this is another one of these strategies that's really more about prevention and helping you to regulate unwanted, painful emotions by preventing them in the first place. So, this one is quite important, especially if you're have been experiencing FND symptoms. You can know how totally disruptive it can be for your life, your lifestyle, your habits, and it may have really interfered with those accumulation of positive emotions because of your um, daily and long-term behaviors, rituals, socializing. It can really interfere with accumulating those long-term positive emotions, and we'll talk more about that as we go forward. But it's really hard to be happy with it, uh, life experienced without it feeling like it's worth living. And building a life requires attention to one's own values and priorities over the long run. And this can take time, patience, and persistence. And especially if FND has kind of disrupted that and really gotten you off of the values you've thought you've had and your priorities, like probably everything's really shifted. And so long-term happiness really means experiencing life as worth living and in alignment with your priorities and your values. And this often gets disruptive, especially when FND first comes into one's life, because it usually starts at the highest level of symptom load, unlike neurological illnesses that start gradually over time and people kind of get used to the symptoms. FND for most people starts out at the highest level of impairment at high intensity and really disrupts your life. So it's hard to be happy when your life is not what you expected it to be. And accumulating positive events may require changing your life. And if positive events are not occurring in your life very often, you may need to change your life so that these positive events will occur more often. And this can take some experimentation. Accumulating events that build a life worth living is like saving pennies in a piggy bank. And so what worked in the past may not work for you now, and there's new habits that need to be built. So a life worth living is a life that you value and that contains things that you value. And two things are really important here. So, first, you need to go into that wise mind to find and describe your most important values. And then, second, you may need to push yourself to overcome fear, regret, shame, guilt, hopelessness, and identifying the values you want to pursue in your life. And oftentimes people will think, oh, it's impossible. I want to be my old self and it's impossible. But there may be different ways to either um, have that value show up in your life, or maybe your values are changing. So short-term pleasure versus long-term happiness. So short-term pleasures can sometimes interfere with building a life of stable happiness and contentment. Always seeking things that make us feel different or better right now can sometimes get in the way of building a permanent positive events in our lives. So sometimes we seek a pleasant event to avoid working on the long-term goals and to make permanent changes in our lives. So even though last lecture I told you to go out and do as many pleasant activities as you can. The dialectic here, which is, sometimes two things can be opposite, or I will tell you things that are completely contrary to each other. That's the dialectical nature of this treatment, is that if this can sometimes interfere, the short-term positive accumulation of pleasant feelings can sometimes interfere with getting the lasting permanent changes that are needed. So you need to be doing both, or at least mindful of that. So permanent positive events are related to the following: living our lives according to our own personal values, achieving goals that are important to us, and developing lasting and loving interpersonal relationships. And I know that these can often be disrupted with chronic FND illness, the and can interfere with recovery. So you want to build a life worth living step by step, okay? And we're going to talk about all those steps. We want to avoid avoiding. That's the most important step. You can see this on this chart. So you want to be aware when you're avoiding, and you want to minimize avoiding. A central problem for people is that sometimes they avoid doing what's necessary, and it can be scary. This new normal that you don't really understand, not knowing, you may not know what you want even in life. Your whole life philosophy might have changed, or things seem impossible, or moodiness, or emotional overload, or an inability to accept life that seems unfair. And it can be unfair. And although these factors and others can be understandable for avoiding, the hard work necessary to build a life worth living, even if it seems unfair, is to do what's needed. And ultimately, each one of us has to build our life worth living. So that's the first step. Just be aware if you're avoiding. Two is to identify the values that are important to you. But what are values? When I first did this, I didn't know what a value was. What are values exactly? I kind of had an idea, but values are things that really matter. They're things that are important to you, that you cherish about life, that are your highest priorities in life. And it's really nice and crystallizing to start to become aware of what exactly are those. And they can help get our behavior in a way that's regulating our emotions. So we're meaning making machines. We love meaning and values and a sense that we are engaged in them. So values are not goals, they're not outcomes, and they are not the future. Values are a way of living that, and they are about engaging in activities that you value. It's prioritizing straight when you make a life decision, big ones and little ones. Values are like pathless paths. They give you life direction and meaning, but they do not have an endpoint. So values are like guideposts. They remind you of what you care about, and values may tell you that a specific goal is important to work on, but achieving that goal does not mean you can forget that value in your life. So, for example, you can work on a relationship, achieving things in your life and having integrity, but there's no date in the future when you can say, I have achieved that value and I don't need to keep that priority in my life anymore. There's no destination, it's a journey. Um, and values change over time and often are not simply um, to figure out. Values can change during your lifetime, and they often do. And they correlate with your phases of life and result, and often they come about, and values can change with a major life event. FND is often a very major life event. Values can also be in conflict with each other. Figuring out which values are most important at any given point in your life can be very important. So having a good time seeking friends and things that give you pleasure. Having free time may be very important when you are young and fancy free and few obligations. But once you are married and have a baby, having a family, staying close, and spending time with your spouse and child might be far more important. So this is just an example. Um, and so, good question to ask yourself is what in life are your highest priorities? What in life really matters to you? What is the direction you want your life to go on in? And what is in your life now that you do not want to lose? And so, what things of value are not in your life right now? That's another one. Simply affirming your own values is a way to has been found to buffer psychological stress and responses. So, just knowing them, saying them out loud, weirdly can just help decrease psychological stress. Um, so, um, you could think about the fact that values and their roles in building a uh, life worth living is similar to values in a kind of therapy called acceptance and commitment therapy. That's very similar to DBT. It was developed at the same time. Marsha Linehan and Stephen Hayes were friends, and I think co-created things together often, and has a lot of overlap. And so some of this values work has overlap with that therapy as well. And you want to really decide which values are yours. And here we have a list that you can go over once the lecture is over as well. But there are games online. There's a values card sort. You can find all sorts of free uh, search engine uh, uh, services where they will help you for free figure out what your top uh, values are. But the act of doing that is quite important for improving your long-term mood. And we think this may indirectly and perhaps directly change your FND symptoms, make them less likely to happen, or perhaps prevent them from happening in the first place. And so the um, you want to identify also once you do this, when you decide whether values are really your own, that's really important to think about because sometimes we just automatically have values and we haven't really thought through them. We make other people's values our own without really thinking about it. Sometimes we speak and act as if we value things that in fact we don't. We value others' opinions of us, so we live according to their values just to get approval. Most of us do some of this some of the time, and some of us do it all of the time. And it can be hard to live according to our own values when what we really want is to fit in with others. And this is especially what we really want to do. And it can be especially difficult if the group we want to fit in has values that are different than our own. And to have a life worth living, however, we have to live according to our own values. And of course, it's if we also highly value having others love and approve of us, we may also have to live at least some of our life according to others' values. And it's important to know the balance and our highest values and getting love and approval from others, or also when it's living according to our own wise mind values. So there's conflicts, of course, that come up, but and it takes some thoughtfulness and checking the facts. And a good question to ask yourself is if you could act according to a particular value, but could not tell anybody about it, would you? For example, if being an educated person is important value to you, but you could not tell anyone about it, what that you were taking the course to further your education, would you still take the course? If anything were possible, what direction would you want your life to go towards? This is not about what you think are realistic or what others may think you deserve. So that's often to kind of think of in those terms with those questions. And then identify one value to work on now. You don't want to get overwhelmed. Rome wasn't built in a day. Um, you want to do one thing at a time and focus on one to be successful. And most people have many important values, and just focus on just one that's your highest priority. Otherwise, the task will feel too big and overwhelming. And be sure to pick a value that you actually want to work on at, at this time, and look at what is in your life now that you really value, and what valuable things are not in your life right now. So good questions to ask yourself. Which value is your highest priority now? And what areas does your current life not match your values well? So those are good questions to kind of get um, focused on this. And then, is your behavior in accord with your wise mind values? Are there things you really value that are not in your life right now? Are you doing things that you value? Are you doing things that go against your core values? Where do you need to make changes in your life that will match and be most important for you? So identify a few goals then that are related to this value. So goals are something specific that you can achieve. And identify just some goals that will get you closer to your values. Once you have achieved a goal, you don't have to work on it anymore. And uh, but it doesn't mean that that value isn't in your life anymore. So think about what goals will get you closer to living that and having that value show up in your life. Like, what would, if you took a picture of yourself with that value really manifest in your life, what would it look like? And that often can be a goal. But you want it something that's measurable, achievable, um, and specific, that kind of SMART goal that's testable. And so that's step four. This and So really think about some goals and what will get you closer to living your value. And goals need to be very specific. Good questions to ask yourself are, what is one thing you could accomplish that would be in accordance with your values that you're working on? What is one thing about your behavior that you could change to be living in accordance with the value you're working on? Are there major impediments that must be overcome before you can accomplish the goal? So, if your value is to have steady income that meets your basic needs, a goal might be to get a job. If your value is to have close and satisfying relationships with others, their goal might be to make one friend. If your value is to be courageous in facing and living life, a goal might be to do something that you are afraid of, or that you've been avoiding. If you value being healthy, a goal might be to eat more fruits and vegetables. So just remember the art of the possible and setting goals. Be sure that your goals are reasonable. There's no point in setting up goals that can't be achieved. The value is to compete successfully with others. Setting a goal to be a national tennis champion in 2 years, when you've never played tennis, is completely unrealistic. It also has to be important to avoid goals that will reduce your quality of life if they are met. For example, you value sacrifices for other, giving away your college education savings to a friend who wants a new car is likely to cause long-term harm. So, yeah, just be mindful of that, um, and use your wise mind and be effective. And so you want to choose a goal to work on now. That's number five. Put goals in order of importance and reasonableness. You cannot work on every goal related to a value all at once. It can be very helpful to organize the list into a list with the most important and realistically possible goal at the top of that list and just select one. Um, Select the one that's reasonable and important, and then identify the very small steps towards your goal. Figure out what small steps so it's not overwhelming. And these are long-term goals, so they're going to take time. You need to be patient. Ask yourself what you have to accomplish to get to the goal. Break it into small steps that you can take one at a time. The first step that you could take now, maybe even if you don't know all the steps, break it down. Again, if it feels overwhelming or too big, break it down again. It means it's too big. Use your emotions to help you know, which step and how big of a step to take. If it feels overwhelming, it's too big. Break it down into a smaller step. Take one action step now. Possible goals might, if your example, like let's say you want to be part of a group, your possible goals could be reconnect with an old friend, get a more social job, join a club. Pick one goal to work on now. Maybe it's joining a club. So that would be your goal. So the action steps for moving towards might be to look for clubs on online, go to the bookstore in your house and ask for book groups, join an interactive online game or chat room, and then take one step, turn on the computer. Um, so um, that is um, your assignment this week if you choose to accept it. So it's like the mission impossible. This is the mission possible. So values and priorities list. This is something you can look through, see if any of these values resonate with you. And really you use your emotions and your wise mind. Like you'll values are really words just with meaning. If it lights you up or seems important to you, then it's a value. And so go ahead and don't be afraid to use your emotion mind and your wise mind in making these decisions about values. And so there's a list of values here, and then some associated goals you could consider attending a group, being part of a group, being powerful, able to influence others, achieving things, life of pleasure and satisfaction, life of exciting events, behaving respectfully, being self-directed, being a spiritual person, being secure, recognizing the universal good in things, contributing to a larger community, working in development, having integrity. And these are all meanings and words that you make up. There's no unit, there, whatever you want them to be. And you can put lots more ideas. I mean, there's only a few um, values on here. If you can play the values card sort on the computer, and you can add cards, or there's a game you can play to figure that out. But maybe you already know what your values are. So yeah, so this I think this is a very important um, thing to do this week. And hopefully you can come back and let us know how things go with accumulating your uh, positive emotions by working on your values. All right. Let us know how it goes. Feel free to write something in the comments below.